Hey guys, it's Gary. Why am I back? Well, I'm back because, like I said in an earlier video, the only time I can do videos is when I have a day off work. The work days are either generally too long or just I'm very bad with time management. So even if I don't have a full 8-hour work day, by the time I get home and shower and eat, I'm pretty tired from work. So this is weird because I've had 2 consecutive days off. This is the end of my weekend, essentially. So I'll be working probably minimally the next 5 days in a row. Through the weekend, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, definitely Monday. So it's not until Tuesday next week that I stand another day off. So I thought I would do a video now while I could. I wanted to do one yesterday, and I had pulled out a CD to listen to, and then decided, well, maybe I'll do a video on Gary Burton. And instead of doing what I normally do, which is pull out all my albums by a specific artist and give my impressions of them, record the video, and then typically what happens is I go back and I watch the video, and then I start listening to the albums that I spoke about. I'm not listening to them a lot before I film the video, and making the video causes me to go back and listen to them after I make the video, and then of course I get these impressions or little facts that I forgot about the albums after the fact. And then I'm like, gee, I wish I would have put that in my video, or I forgot this album is better than I thought it was, or this album is not as good as I thought it was, which happens quite a bit. Not on every single album, but so this time, I desired to hear a specific Gary Burton album, and after I put that on, I put on another one, and then another one, and I'm like, oh, let me do a Gary Burton video, but then I decided I'm going to listen to a whole bunch of this stuff, and for once make a video at the end of my time off, at the end of my weekend, but with impressions of a lot of the albums that I've listened to. And so I'm just going to show what I have. I didn't go crazy looking for all my vinyl. I know there's one vinyl I have that I didn't find, which I have on CD. I got a lot of duplication. I got a lot of things that I bought on CD, that I have on original albums. And really, the only reason I really show the albums is if I either don't have the CD of them, or I think just in terms of the artwork and everything, obviously the albums are larger and they show up better on camera than the CD covers and stuff. Oh my God, that's heavy. So, actually, let me start with the one that kicked it off, which is a CD, which I don't have on album. 1999, this got re-released. Here's an album by Gary Burton. Now, if you've watched my videos, and I've spoken several times about how much I love the solo album by an artist, where an artist does everything by himself. I prefer when he overdubs, but plays all the instruments himself, goes in the studio, everything's just all him. And Gary Burton has only one of these albums that I know of. I didn't even know about it actually until it got reissued. I can't believe it got reissued in 1999 because I bought it as a new re-release. I was totally unaware of this album that Gary, I think, originally recorded for Atlantic. And it was re-released in 1999 on the 32 Jazz label, manufactured by Rhino Entertainment. I'm pretty sure that the 32 Jazz label is not in existence anymore. That was producer Joel Dorn's label that he started, I believe, as a reissue label of recordings for various labels that had gone out of print and that he produced over the years, and then he got the rights to re-release them. Pretty sure Joel Dorn passed away not that long ago. So here's first time on CD. It's an album called Gary Burton Alone at Last. Now, I'm wondering if, there's some Gary Burton fans that may not be aware of this album. I was not aware of it until, I don't know if I saw it in the store. I definitely bought it when it was new, and it's like, wow, an all-solo album by Gary Burton. That's awesome. It is an all-solo album, originally Atlantic, which would place it in the, When did he start with Atlantic? 1969, I want to say. And there's a booklet in here that I didn't pull out. Gee, I thought I knew the recording dates. I don't. Oh, I bought this at Borders. I got the Borders sticker in here. So that's where I saw it. I saw it at Borders. Holy crap, the book is like fused in there, which means I haven't pulled this out. I can partially open the booklet. I should have prepared. Holy crap, I can't pull the booklet out. It's stuck. Okay, well, I can't pull a booklet out to get the dates, but I'll tell you what, that booklet has, it's actually, it's all gummied in there. It's all gummied in on the label. I got it out. Wow. Here's the booklet. Recording dates. It's originally a two-sided album. It's playing in the background. I don't know if you can hear it. There's audience applause. The first side was a live album of Gary just on solo vibes. 3 tracks that were recorded at the Montreux Jazz Festival in 1971. And they don't even give a month when it was recorded. The second side was recorded, which is 4 tracks, was recorded in Atlantic Recording Studios in New York. And on that second side, Burton plays vibes. There's one track where he even overdubs vibes. So there's 2 vibes parts. He plays a little acoustic piano. He's a much better pianist than I ever. Well, he was a teacher at Berkeley, so I guess he figured he could play piano. But you don't generally hear him playing piano too often. Hotel Hello with Steve Swallow is the only other album I can think of that he plays piano on. So he's a much better pianist than I expected. Little organ on one track. And electric piano, organ, and acoustic piano he also plays on the second side. So I like the second side. I like the first side. The first side's amazing because you realize it's a live concert. And, he pretty much invented that 4-mallet technique. And, man, he's an incredible player. When you hear him playing live in that first half of the album, you hear him playing the melody lines or the improvisatory lines or whatever you call them, the solo lines, but you hear these chords behind it. And you realize, well, he can only be playing 2 notes at a time, but the chords sound much fuller and thicker using that 4-mallet technique. So that when he actually even overdubs on the second side and has 2 vibe parts going on, it actually doesn't even sound that much fuller than he does live. His technique is just so great. So this is one of those albums that, I'm such a solo album fanatic, of solo musician album fanatic. This is one that gets pulled out a lot. When I'm not necessarily listening maybe to other albums by him. Just a real nice album, easy to listen to, short 39-minute album, pretty typical. But that's what got me started. I wanted to hear this after listening to Tertiary Reptiles After the Rain. Always does that. I get on this tear to this thing to listen to solo albums a lot after I listen to that particular Tertiary Reptile album. And then I pulled out, just to show what I've got in vinyl, which I bought in the vinyl age. Ring, famous album. You knows how Everhard Weber gets another top billing. Mick Goodrick on guitar, very underrated guitarist. I believe he was a teacher in Berkeley too, and he influenced and taught Pat Metheny. Pat Metheny plays on here. Steve Swallow, who, in the 70s and 80s, Steve Swallow, I think, was on every Gary Burton album. Bob Moses on the percussion, and Everhard Weber on bass. So they had two bass players. This is considered a classic. This is the ECM era. This is the 70s here. Recorded July 74. For my tastes, though, great pieces on here. For some reason, I prefer this one. And I love Mick Goodrick's playing, and Mick Goodrick does not play on this one. Otherwise, it's pretty much a similar band. Passengers, which is the album that came after, this is recorded November 76. I really like this. I like the cover, too. Again, Gary Burton, Pat Metheny's the only guitarist on this one. This time, Danny Gottlieb plays drums, who went on to Pat Metheny's original group, the first drummer in his group, and Steve Swallow and Everhard Weber on basses. For some reason, I just a couple pieces on here I really dig. And this is a really good album too. I think I prefer it to Ring. Though both of those albums together, I think, would fit on one CD. And ECM should do that because sometimes they allow their albums to go out of print. And the only reason is they don't think they could sell enough copies to really make it worthwhile keeping in print. So, when they have these short albums, why don't they double up? Another grouping, Gary Burton, of course, made a ton of albums as a leader. Starting in 1961, I believe, was his first solo album. After being a sideman with George Shearing and tons of other people. He started really young. Hank Garland, he played. There's this incredible tune. I once bought this compilation album of called 50 Years of Jazz Guitar, a double vinyl set. And there was this track by a guy named Hank Garland who I had never heard of. They actually made a movie of his life. And this incredible track called Move, which is something that a lot of jazz artists recorded. Very fast tune. And the front line on it was Hank Garland on guitar playing these really fast riffs. And a vibraphone player, who I think was 16 at the time when that was recorded, matching him. They're playing these very fast riffs in total syncopation. Blew my mind and turned out to be Gary Burton, who I already was familiar with Gary Burton by the time I bought that album. And didn't know he started so young. So Gary started really young. Co-led... I won't say other groups, but besides his solo career, he had pairings, some very famous pairings. Ralph Towner, Gary Burton matchbook. This is the first album they made together, July 74. This one's a little odd because even though it was recorded by the ECM engineer in one of their studios in Ludwigsburg, the sound on this one isn't as full as most ECM albums. I don't know why, because it sounds more like an American thing. Every once in a while, like the album Hotel Hello, an ECM album that was recorded in Massachusetts, not using the typical, usual ECM engineers and studios, doesn't sound as good as most of the ECMs. This one is a little, empty, not full sounding, like they didn't use the miking techniques to pick up like the acoustic guitars that they used on further albums. It's a really good album. Very, very mellow, very laid back. Obviously, there's no percussion. It's just Ralph Towner on acoustic and classical guitars and Gary on vibes. That was from 74. Slideshow. They paired up again for the second and last time, for a full album anyway. And this was recorded in May of 85, so it's 11 years later. This one has that sound, that typical ECM sound, oddly enough recorded in the same studio in Ludwigsburg with the same engineer that did the earlier album 11 years before, and yet this one sounds so much better. Very nice full sound. Again, Ralph was playing classical and 12-string guitars. In addition to the vibraphone, though, Gary Burton's playing marimba on this, and the marimba gives it a nice color, and it's also a very good percussion instrument because of the fast decay of the notes. So, when you don't have a bass or percussion, that marimba really gives it a nice rhythmic oomph there. I really like this album, and there's some, they do Blue and Green, the Miles Davis Bill Evans tune, but they do some Ralph Towner things, several things, Charlotte's Tangle, Beneath an Evening Sky, a bunch of Ralph Towner tracks. Actually, they're all by Ralph Towner, with the exception of the Miles Davis Bill Evans tune. This is a really good one. Really good album. But that is a new release. I'm not showing these in any specific order. Here's, I think, one that is a little overlooked, and I missed buying this on CD, and I'm kind of pissed I did. It came out on CD, and I missed it. And, you just can't buy everything all the time. This is March 1973. One of the few Gary Burton albums that doesn't have Steve Swallow on bass. It has Abraham Laboriel on bass, who played with everybody. Abe is one of those for-hire studio kind of guys that played not just jazz. He was one of those guys that I guess could read music and, would be one of those guys that would just, you need a bass player, call this guy, and he would go on tour with, singer-songwriters, whoever. Harry Blazer on drums, Mick Goodrick on guitar, who's really great on this. I love his sound on this. I think early Pat Metheny, like the first Pat Metheny group album. This is 73. This is just before Pat Metheny was actually in Gary Burton's group. And, of course, Gary Burton on vibes. This was people don't talk about this one a whole lot. This is a really good, just a really nice quartet album, all electric guitar. Abe Laboriel's playing acoustic bass. I really like this. I'm so sorry I missed a CD on that. Here's an album, Gary, his quintet. Once again, going back to, these are all ECM, December 75. The Quintet Dreams So Real. These are all Carla Bley tunes. And Gary's recorded a lot of individual Carla Bley tunes on various albums anyway over the years. This one's a full album of that. The band here, Mick Goodrick again on guitar. Here's Pat Metheny on guitar as well. So Pat's in the group as well. Steve Swallow on bass. And Bob Moses on drums. Bob Moses had his own band for a while as a leader. Say, late 70s, early 80s. I remember him being interviewed on the radio. And there was a new jazz label. Was it Electro Musician? I'm not sure. That came around in the late 70s. And Bob Moses actually had a couple albums as a band leader. He disappeared. I don't know where Bob Moses is. This is a good album, too. A little heavier. You know, Carla Bley's music is very sophisticated. Here's one that I bought that I was a little disappointed in. Gary Burton and Keith Jarrett. This is not an album. This is more of a completist album. This was recorded for Atlantic, and I kind of knew to expect that the sound quality wouldn't be up to ECM standards, and it's not. Kind of a muddy recorded album. The band is just really good, but it's the direction of the music. This was recorded in 1970, and the first track is in true hippie style called Grow Your Own. And it's weird. It was written by Keith Jarrett, but he's hardly audible on this. The band is Gary Burton on vibes, Keith Jarrett, who plays electric piano and acoustic piano and even soprano sax. Sam Brown on guitar, who passed away fairly young, I think, and he's a really good jazz guitarist, very much in the Mick Goodrick mold. Steve Swallow on bass and Bill Goodwin on drums. The first track it's rockish. You don't even, oddly enough, Keith Jarrett wrote it. You don't even hear him in it. His keyboards are buried in the background. Sam Brown uses a very clean guitar sound, but a lot of his playing is, well, called for by the direction of the music. It's like a late 60s rock, but don't think of, psychedelic fuzz tone guitar. Think of that real clean guitar sound. It doesn't sound very good, actually. And because of the direction of the music, a lot of it's very groove oriented. Steve Swallow is playing electric bass at this point. So, it sets a lot of very late 60s kind of grooves in the music. Though there's definitely moments in here that are really good to listen to. Moonchild, In Your Quiet Place, which is a track that Gary Burton recorded a couple times, including a live solo vibes rendition on the first album I showed, is that solo album. Coma and Vietnam by Steve Swallow, which is a piece that Gary Burton recorded, at least 3 times, if not more, and Steve Swallow recorded as well several times. I always forget that track, but the melody is the main melody and the main riff to it is very noticeable. And I don't know how many versions of this tune there are, but there's a lot. Steve Swallow's done a bunch of them, and Gary Burton's recorded it over the years and re-recorded it. It's a good track. Apart from that, really, most of the tracks are actually written by Keith Jarrett. Actually, all of them, except for the Steve Swallow piece, Coma and Vietnam. But not a great album. They kind of this is one of those albums that sounded great at the time because it had that. It's got that kind of rockish groove to the rhythm, but it sounds really dated now. Not a great quality recording. It was recorded in New York in 1970, but just one of those things. I paid $6.29 for it. And another grouping, famous grouping, and I can't find one of the albums. Of course, a classic. Gary Burton and Chick Corea Duet. Crystal Silence was the first thing they did, the first duet album they did on ECM. What year is it? 72? Yeah, November 72. They recorded their follow-up album, which came, I believe, several years later. Might have even been as late as 79. have on CD. I don't know. This is the one vinyl I couldn't find, and I decided to film the video instead of going nuts looking for the vinyl. Senior Mouse, which is a track that Chick Corea has recorded many, many, many times. They even do a Steve Swallow track, a couple Steve Swallow tracks, actually. Several. Michael Gibbs, Gary Burton has always recorded a lot of tracks of. Actually, you wouldn't know it to look at my Chick Corea collection. I have quite a few of his albums and a lot of his CDs. I'm not actually a fan because I find his playing, he's a great pianist, great keyboard player. I find his playing too busy. He never slows down just to let a chord sustain. He's a very busy, like hyperactive player, and but I realize that he's a brilliant technician. He's a brilliant musician. And if you saw the stack of albums and CDs I have by him, you'd be surprised. This is not as mellow as you would think that a piano vibes duet would be, because the music is, I find, quite hyper, and I love it. There's times when I love it, and it's really good music, and there's no doubt it's a classic. And their other album I have, I don't know where I put it. My favorite album of theirs that they did together, though, which isn't technically a duet album, though, is a Lyric Suite for Sextet, which is something, it's another duet album, of course, but they've got I'm pretty sure it's a string quartet. Yeah. First violin, second violin, viola, and cello, in addition to the piano and the vibraphone. This I really love. This could be, this is, since Chick wrote this, the entire album, 39-minute album, I'm going to kind of put this a little bit more firmly in the Chick Corea albums, and say that, this would be in my top 3 Chick Corea albums, really. This is really pretty, but again, I wouldn't say there's not improvisation on it, but a lot more of this is written out. And this is one that sits a little bit better with me. It's a little slower and a little less hyperactive than a lot of Chick Corea stuff. This is a really great album. If you don't have this and you like these guys at all, that's a must-have for either artist, I think. I showed this one before. There's 2 albums that Gary Burton Quartet made. This one was 82, and I forget the first one came just before it, which was called Easy as Pie, which I think is from 1980. And both of those albums, including this one, are still waiting to come out on CD. I'm hoping ECM does one of those reissue things like they did with the John Abercrombie Quartet. And that is those albums of his that had only ever come out on vinyl finally got a 3 CD box set. So I'd say Gary Burton is overdue for one, at least for Easy as Pie, Picture This, and I'm sure there's something else I could throw in there. This band is not a named band. This is recorded in January 1982. I bought it as a new release. I remember going to the record store and seeing it out there. An interesting band. Again, Steve Swallow is still in the band on electric bass. He's the sole electric instrument. Gary Burton on vibes. A guy named Mike Hyman on drums, who recorded both Easy as Pie and Picture This. And Jim Odgren on alto saxophone. I particularly like this lineup because there's no piano in it. And it's not that I don't like piano, but in his quintet, or even a quartet when he plays with piano, there's so much harmonically going on between the vibes and piano and the rhythm section. I prefer it without the piano. I prefer it to be a little bit lighter. I like the idea of the vibraphone or Gary Burton being the only harmonic instrument. It makes it lighter, airier, and you really can hear in the mix Gary Burton's playing a lot more when there's no piano to also kind of have to mix into that sound stage. Love the way the alto saxophone sails above the music. That's just a really good, a nice blending alto sax and vibraphone, bass and drums. And this is another one that's not as heralded. And I think Gary Burton was recording at least an album a year at this point, and I think some of them just went by people. I never even saw Easy as Pie in the which preceded this album in the record store, and I was already into this music back then around 1980, and it just, I would have probably bought it at that time, but I just never saw it in the record store. So the records that came before and after. So this one I burned this to, well, actually I copied it into my computer years ago, and I've been listening to it since then there. But, it's got the vinyl crack and pop going on when I listen to it. But I love this. I love this album so much. I love it as much as I do like Passengers and Ring, but it's probably not considered a classic by most people. This one I think is considered a classic. I mentioned this before. Hotel Hello. I love the colors in this cover, and when they reissued it on CD, they did it as a black and white cover, which makes no sense to me. That whole sunrise, sunset thing going on there on the water and everything doesn't work in black and white. Why didn't they reproduce this in color on CD? I don't know. This is from 1974. When I first put it on, I realized the sound quality wasn't up to the usual ECM standards, and that was because it was recorded in some studio in Massachusetts. So this was probably done on a weekend or on a few days off from Gary teaching at Berkeley or something, I'm guessing. But I love the concept. I wish they would do it again, though. Gary Burton and Steve Swallow have not played together for a while. But it's just a duet album, which I love. Next to the solo albums, these are my favorites. This is a classic album. Probably everybody has this that watches my videos. Gary Burton plays vibraphone, marimba, and organ, and Steve Swallow plays the electric bass and piano on this. Some of the pieces do have a 60s kind of dated vibe to them, but I still like it. I still really dig this album. Again, I like the fact that there's no percussion on it. I don't have anything against percussion, but it's a lighter listening experience. It's closer to listening to like a solo musician album. Little bit more airy than obviously a band that has a bass and drums thing going on, a rhythm section. Classic album. Love it. I think Carm said that's one of his favorites. I've avoided showing, for the most part, albums I have with Gary Burton as a side man, but I have to have two exceptions here. One of them, I'm pretty sure this is a student that went to Berkeley that Gary discovered, jazz pianist Makoto Ozone, who I have a whole bunch of solo albums by. I actually have one behind me in a frame that I just covered up with a David Quayle thing. But this was his first solo album, at least in America. And he was very young when he did it. I think this was his first solo album overall. Japanese pianist. And quite young. I'm pretty sure he was discovered by Gary Burton. He played in Gary Burton's band. This was a solo album. Pretty sure this was his first, as I said, recorded in 1984. And I bought this on CD as well. Fantastic band, though. The thing, his most noticeable influence, though, I think, is Chick Corea. You can definitely hear that busyness. I got to tell you, I prefer him over Chick Corea. He's not quite as busy, but very much in the mold of Chick Corea's piano playing. I think if you heard him, it would become apparent that, yeah, this guy's very heavily influenced by Chick Corea. But this was, when I saw this lineup, and I didn't know anything about Makoto Ozone when I bought this album when it came out, but as Gary Burton on vibes and Eddie Gomez on upright bass, just the three of them. So piano, upright bass, and vibes. And I thought, oh, this is nice. And a whole program of originals and one solo piano improvisation, which Makoto Ozone did on his first 2 or 3 albums. He ended the album with a solo piano improvisation, which is really good. So yeah, I prefer him actually over Chick Corea. See, I don't know if you can see how young he looks here. Probably not. So this is probably, one of his Gary Burton's little side project things or supporting musician things that if you're into Gary Burton, you probably have to hear. And the other one is, which is one of my, I used to always say it's my favorite album of all time. Definitely is up there. There's Everhard Weber's Fluid Rustle, which Gary Burton, again, it's an unusual instrumentation. There's two vocalists, Norma Winstone from Azimuth and Bonnie Herman doing wordless vocalese or written out vocal parts. Gary Burton on vibraphone and marimba. Everhard Weber on bass, and Bill Frisell's first ever recording session, which is why I had never heard of him before. And this is from 78, I want to say. I don't see the date on here. I bought this shortly after it came out. January 79 this was recorded in. And Everhard Weber's late wife did the lovely, lovely album cover drawings there. Love this album. Gary Burton's vibraphone and marimba is almost the sole harmonic instrument on here because Bill Frisell is mostly playing, he's coloring the music with phrases. He's not doing like chordal stuff on guitar. Most of what he's playing, or it's probably written out, but it's single note themes and things like that. There's not a whole lot of strumming and chord things going on. Most of its colors, almost like a saxophone or a trumpet would be. So there's no horn instrument in here. So the vibraphone and the marimba are really the chordal base of the music on the album. This is just such a fantastic album that even though I know people don't listen to jazz or instrumental music, I never understand. This is one of those I can never understand anybody in the world not loving, And yet, people, oddly enough, I've read that are even fans of Everhard Weber, I've even read don't like this album. I can't believe that. I can't believe that. Okay, so, going back through, this I highly recommend. Alone at Last. That's the one I started with. I'm already going way too long here. Just to show the lyric suite for sextet, Chick Corea, Gary Burton. Here's the horrible reproduction of the Hotel Hello in black and white. I don't know why they did that, and they left the colors out. Shame on them. Shame on them. Ring. Passengers. Dreams So Real, the Carla Bley album. Crystal Silence. That's such a great cover, huh? And now we get to the things that are not duplicates of the vinyl stuff. Oh, that's a big stack. Oh, I got this stack, and I know it's going to fall over sometime during this video. Here's the other album I couldn't find on vinyl that I know I have, the Duet album. Gary Burton and Chick Corea, their second thing that they did together. This came out in 79. It was probably recorded in 78 or 79. Very much like the first album, very much like Crystal Silence. Loved it. I remember seeing a concert on PBS. It was an hour-long concert that the two of them played, probably when they were supporting this album. And I don't think that ever came out on video cassette, that concert, or anything. It was, I guess, one of those things maybe recorded for PBS TV here in the States. Many years later, not for ECM, but in 1997, after a long layover, Chick Corea and Gary Burton did Native Sense, the new duets, which I bought. I haven't listened to this in ages. Surprising this was not for ECM. And then a whole bunch of years later, on the Concord jazz label, 2008, the new Crystal Silence. Chick Corea and Gary Burton again. Here's a live album, a 2-disc set, big fat package there with a nice booklet in there. Second CD is just a live duet, mostly of tracks they've already recorded. And the first one is actually a concert, the two of them, with the Sydney Symphony. So this is recorded in Australia. Concord. So this was a 2008 release. So they continued to play duets through the years, probably more in live concerts than in the studio. And this one, again, I have to really give this a listen because it's been a while since I listened to this. Now, for fans of that duet, Chick Corea and Gary Burton of the Piano Vibes duet, his former student, Gary Burton and Makoto Ozone, also did their own duet. This is actually on the GRP label. GRP was not known for a lot of acoustic jazz, really. They were very electric-oriented. This is all, just piano and vibes, very much in that mode of Chick Corea. This is from '95. This is a live studio recording. I think, I don't know to what extent people know this. I remember seeing this a lot in the record stores. So it was one that was always in the racks. My stack is about to fall over here, so I have to take a break. Okay, this is going way too long already. Getting to some things that maybe aren't quite as well known is this album, which I have to try to pull out the booklet for because I don't know when it was recorded. January 1978, Gary Burton had a new quartet. Old friend Steve Swallow is very much on bass guitar here. Gary Burton on vibes. Roy Haynes on drums. and Tiger Okoshi on trumpet. Another interesting band I don't like as much as the Picture This Band or Easy as Pie band with saxophone, but Tiger Okoshi on trumpet, again, I like because there's no piano in there. So once again, you've got Gary Burton as the sole harmonic instrument, and Steve Swallow's still on bass, Roy Haynes on drums, and trumpet as well. This is a short one, only 38 minutes. This one, I think, only recently finally came out here in the U.S. This was taking so long to come out. This is one of those that I actually sent away mail order to ECM in Germany to get, because it was one of the few that had been released on CD by Gary Burton, but that didn't make it over to the United States. And I'm pretty sure I saw it, within the last few years available here. But this is one that I got sick of waiting for. I didn't have the original vinyl, and I really wanted to hear it because of the unusual lineup. I will say and I love this album. This is a good one. The thing that's interesting about this, again, with the standard ECM engineers and everything, is that this album, Steve Swallow's electric bass, is recorded, and if you didn't know better, you'd swear it was acoustic. Now, if you've ever seen Steve Swallow, or you heard most of his albums, his recent albums, he usually uses a pick when he plays, and uses a very trebly sound. It's very obvious that he's playing electric bass. On this one, the bass sound is very soft. The electric bass is very soft, and I'm sure that it's not, because I never heard other albums from around this period where his bass sounded like that. I'm pretty sure it was the choice of the engineer to record the bass a bit softer, and it sounds maybe slightly a bit more back in the mix. Maybe it's a little bit more felt than heard. Really sounds good, though. It really sounds good. The bass in the mix really sounds like an acoustic bass, and if you weren't aware that it was Steve Swallow playing electric, you might think it's an acoustic bass. Pretty sure that it was the way that the engineer chose to record it then, and the sound and tone settings on that he used. This is a really interesting album. And a couple, here's an oddity. I still got the stack of CDs on my lap that's going to fall off here. Here's an oddball thing. This is a live album, several different musicians. It's got Pat Metheny on, who gets top billing because he's the most popular. Pat Metheny actually not with his band, but he plays with the Heath Brothers on this. And then Gary Burton and Ahmad Jamal on here. I'm showing this because it's these are two concerts, one from '81 and one from '83, both in January, at the Palace of Festivals Theater in Cannes, France. So apparently, I don't know if they have an annual in January jazz concert festival in France that they recorded a couple years of gigs and finally just combined them. On here, Gary Burton's got an interesting band, Pierre Michelot and Renee Erdiger, who are two older musicians who played on Miles Davis's album, was it 58, The Elevator to the Gallows, a soundtrack to a French movie that Miles went over to France to improvise this soundtrack to this French movie. He went by himself, and he used two of the musicians on here, along with a pianist who I believe passed away. And the bass player and drummer here are the two guys, I believe, that played on that Elevator to the Gallows, which I forgot what the French title is, but it equates down to Elevator to the Gallows. Great moody album, by the way. I think easily one of Miles Davis's best acoustic albums. I think probably better than almost anything else by him that I have. In terms of just his solo acoustic band. Really love that. One of the moodiest albums that Miles Davis ever recorded, as a matter of fact. So on here, you got the bass and drums, the French rhythm section there, Gary on vibes, and guitar by David Humar, who I don't know how long he played with Gary Burton or whether this was just put together for this gig. They do 4 tunes, My Foolish Heart, No More Blues, The Night Has a Thousand Eyes, and Duke Ellington's African Flower. So four longer tracks on here. This is an interesting album. Pat Metheny sounds a bit odd, slightly out of place, playing with the Heath Brothers maybe. And who else is on here? Oh yes, and Gary Burton and Ahmad Jamal as well, who I don't know. I don't know if that was recorded the same year as his quartet or whether it was from a previous year, because the band is completely different. He's got a different bass player, different drummer. So maybe one of the Gary Burton, Ahmad Jamal things, where they only do 2 tracks here, are from one year, probably 81. Let's see. Yeah, 81. And oh no, actually, it looks like they were all recorded in '81. Both Gary Burton's quartet and his quartet with Ahmad Jamal. I forgot about that. Interesting album. And this is one of those things I didn't really go seeking out. I saw it in the record store, and it looked interesting, so I bought it. And with Pat Metheny on there, a lot of appeal to fans. Gary left ECM Records, and to me, his music did change a bit, and in some ways it became more conservative, and in other ways he seemed to change with the labels he went to. He was recording for Concord Records for a while, and I believe he even recorded an album with a jazz vocalist, or more than one, and started getting very kind of conservative. But between there, he bopped around to the GRP label, where GRP was mostly, with the exception of that duet album with Makoto Ozone, mostly an electric label. And he did some kind of very GRP-ish kind of electric jazz. Cool Nights, Bob James on pianos. Kind of an unusual combination with Gary Burton. Bob Berg, Will Lee, who's the bass player for David Letterman's band. Wolfgang Muthspiel, Pete Erskine, which is a good combination. 1991. But this is much more electric sounding. More in the GRP kind of mode. A lot different from the ECM stuff. It's been a lot of years since I listened to it, and I probably will put it on soon. That might be one of those albums that, knowing I would be disappointed in it when I play it, it's actually better than I expected, maybe, because I don't expect it to be very good. He continued on GRP. Well, this is 1990, where he did one of several reunion albums with Pat Metheny, Will Lee again on bass, again Pete Erskine on drums, Mitch Foreman on keyboards. Again, a bit more in that GRP mode, and another one that I wasn't in love with, to be honest with you. Not horrible. Another reunion thing with Pat Metheny. This time Steve Swallow again, and I love to hear Steve Swallow play with Gary. And this is Concord. This is a bit more recent. This is 2009. Wow, I can't believe it's that long ago. I remember when this was a new release. And they do a few tunes that they've recorded on the earlier albums, like Passengers, and Ring as well, and a whole bunch of newish tracks at the time. Nicer band. Antonio Sanchez was the drummer for Pat Metheny group at the time of this recording. This I have to listen to. This was a bit better. Another GRP album, which I like, I like a whole lot, but it's less in that mode, and that is Six Pack. And what this is Gary basically with an all-star backing band. He's got Jack DeJohnette on drums, and who's the bass player? Not sure. But the concept behind this was that Gary would do a couple tracks each with various guitarists. It's called Six Pack because there's 6 different guitarists on here. So he does a couple tracks with Kevin Eubanks, a couple tracks with Jim Hall. He played with Jim Hall very early on. B.B. King, which is standard B.B. King blues tracks, nothing too great. Kurt Rosenwinkel, who was at this time a fairly new on the scene guitarist, playing with Gary Burton's band. John Scofield, who had been around. And to me, the reason I picked this up was he does 2 tracks with Ralph Towner. The only other time that he did duets with Ralph Towner are the 2 tracks on here. There's no backing band. It's strictly 2 new tracks, well, new at the time, recorded with Ralph Towner that harkens back to his 2 classic duet albums. This was from '92, and this is around as a cutout fairly cheaply. I really bought it for the duet out things with Ralph Towner. some more ECM albums. I'm not doing this in any particular order. I like this. There's a version of the quartet from 85 around, 84, 85, with Gary Burton, Steve Swallow again on drums, on guitar, Mike Hyman again on drums, who was a drummer from the Easy as Pie, Picture This period, and Makoto Ozone on piano. This is good. Gary Burton plays marimba on this one as well as vibes, and it works. You know, I said I don't like the band so much with piano. But this is still really good. There's no solo instrument over this, no guitar, no horns or anything. So they can mix the album so you can still pretty much clearly hear both the vibes and the piano. I think if you have that fifth instrument in there, the middle section might tend to get a little muddy or something. But this is still a really good album from the mid-'80s. With Makoto Ozone. And here's another one from roughly the same period. This is from '86. I think the one that came after that other album I just showed. Whiz Kids, which is a quintet. And it has Gary again on vibraphone, marimba, Makoto Ozone once again on piano, Steve Swallow on bass, a guy named Martin Richmond on drums, and also has a guy named Tommy Smith on saxophone. Like I said, there's a lot going on musically here, and there's nothing wrong with the music. I quite like this album, but again, with the piano and the vibes together, and then with a horn over that, there's a lot of variety. You know, it's a nice sound stage because you do have quite a lot of instruments. You have the marimba in terms of soundstage in addition to the vibraphone. You have the piano, you have the saxophone. A lot of people would love this album. I like it. I have to be in the mood for it. Like I said, there's a lot with those five musicians. There's a lot going on, and there's a lot to listen to. Do I focus on the piano, the vibes, that kind of thing? But still, really good album. A couple compilations. Gary Burton Works. Anybody familiar with the Works series probably has this and knows this. This is unlike some of the Works where I don't know how they chose the tracks. This one has a good selection and a couple of selections from the new Quartet album that I very much love and I wish I had on CD that are on here that are really good. A track from Matchbook, the Gary Burton Ralph Towner duet. A couple tracks from the Steve Swallow Hotel Hello duet album. A track of Gary Burton and Chick Corea. So, there's a good cross section of his stuff, even though it's under 50 minutes. It's a short compilation. Another compilation on ECM. Everybody's probably familiar with the Rarum selected recordings. I don't think any of the tracks from the previous Works compilation are on here, so you could actually get both of these albums and have very little, if any, duplication. And Gary Burton himself selected these tracks, writes little notes about each track, which I love. That's one of the things I like about the about the Rarum series are the notes, the album notes in there. I bought this. I'm a little surprised. I'm not crazy about the album, so I was a little surprised that I bought the CD. I must have got it at a good price. The Rhino reissue of the Atlantic Gary Burton and Keith Jarrett album. I think I probably got it for a really good price. The thing that made me pick it up was there's a full second album on here, which is Gary Burton's 1969 album for Atlantic called Throb, from 1969. And it's a quartet album with guitar on there. Guitar, vibes, bass, and drums. And Throb was, I believe, a very popular album. Gary Burton was really popular in the mid to late 60s, possibly because most of his bands included guitar as the lead instrument. And of course, this is almost pre-fusion. You got to think that Throb was recorded pretty much in 69 at the same time Miles Davis was doing Bitches Brew. So the whole fusion thing hadn't really started yet. And yet this is the first album that you can really detect a guitar, the Throb album I'm speaking of, a guitar, slightly distorted rockish guitar on there, courtesy of Jerry Hahn, who was Gary Burton's guitarist at the time. Steve Swallow's the bass player on that one again, Bill Goodwin on drums. Gary Burton plays vibes and piano on Throb, a bit of piano. And there's Richard Green, a violinist as well, So I was wrong. It's not a quartet. It's a quintet. I'm not sure violins on all the tracks, though. But Throb was, as far as CDs go, pretty much only available as an expensive import separately. And here it is tacked on to the rather short Gary Burton and Keith Jarrett album. And it's really that for Jerry Hahn's guitar is really, from what I'm aware of, the first time you hear kind of sustained, slightly aggressive guitar in Gary Burton's music. He always had a guitarist. He had Larry Coryell prior to this, but that was a bit more closer to mainstream jazz. Throb's an interesting album. I believe it was a very popular album for Gary Burton. And the second album that I pulled out after listening to the Alone, the last one I have to show, after I listened to that Alone at Last album, was this compilation that I got really cheap called Gary Burton Artist's Choice. Now, Gary Burton started recording in 1961 as a solo artist and has never really let up. So you've got a lot of recordings he made in the 60s, a lot in the 70s, a lot in the 80s and 90s, and every decade there's a lot of recordings. So even if you're fanatical about Gary Burton, there's probably a lot you don't have. There's probably, unless you're much even older than me, you probably don't have a lot of the 60s stuff. I bought this as a cutout fairly cheaply. And supposedly Gary Burton selected these tracks. This is from his RCA period, which is in the going up to 69. In 69 he started recording for Atlantic. Prior to that he was recording to RCA. He was recording for RCA. Various musicians in various conglomerations, sometimes just a quartet. But I bought this just to get a taste of those 60s albums. This compilation, I believe, was out of print. Now, oddly enough, when I went on Amazon and I looked, it looks like it's back in print again. It's like $18.99 for the CD, which is kind of expensive for an old compilation like this. This was probably a budget thing when it came out. The thing I like about this is each track inside, which a lot of compilations don't give you a lot of details, gives you the recording date for each track, the album the track came from, and all the musicians who play on that track. The only thing that's missing would be Gary Burton's personal notes on the tracks, which would be great if he had them, especially since he selected these. If you are interested in hearing Gary Burton's history and his start as a leader in the 60s, pick this up. This is awesome. You can buy it used, it's even cheaper. Such an incredible amount. And I was surprised when I listened to this again, because it's been quite a few years since I listened to it, at how well recorded this stuff is. The late 60s were not a great time for studio recordings. But these recordings made for RCA sound really good, really mostly acoustic. And pretty much the only electric instrument that I can recall hearing on any of these recordings is electric guitar, which is pretty much almost always in the very clean, very modern jazz tone. All of the tracks, are arranged chronologically, which is nice. It starts off with a track called Careful, which I was floored by. It's so well recorded. It's an acoustic band, obviously, upright bass, drums, etc., etc., with some very clean electric guitar, and I'm like, oh, that guitar sounds great. I looked it up. It's Jim Hall on guitar. So it wasn't Gary Burton's first album. It was maybe his third album as a leader that this track Careful was taken from. Taken from an album called Something's Coming. And I just, oddly enough, was just listening to this and looked up to see if this Something's Coming was available on CD, and it is as an import CD, but oddly enough, in June 2016, there's going to be a 2 CD set of Gary Burton albums coming out. It's 3 albums, of which Something's Coming, which is, the track is taken from this album. The first track in this compilation is taken from Something's Coming with Jim Hall on it, is one of the 3 albums on there. And it's, I think, 3 albums recorded right in a row, like 63, 64, 65, or something like that are coming on this 2 CD set, which I think I'm going to have to buy. Really interesting period for Gary. The rest of the albums, with the exception of this one track, and I wish they had more from this 1963 Something's Coming album, all the rest of the tracks are from 66, 67, and 68. And Gary was recording a lot during that period. most of the albums he recorded in this period, I think, were fairly popular because I've read about them and heard about them over the years, and I think it's from people gushing about them. There's two really good tracks from an album called The Time Machine. There's two tracks from Duster, which I believe was a really popular Gary Burton album. I believe that's one of the ones that Larry Coryell on guitar. A couple tracks from Lofty Fake Anagram, a 1967 album, which I read a lot about, and again, I think was a really popular album for Gary. A couple tracks from an album that Carla Bley wrote the entire album for Gary called A Genuine Tong Funeral. Fairly well known, and I think that's been available. I know it's available now on CD. And again, that's another album I had read a lot about. A couple live tracks from the Gary Burton Quartet in Concert from 1968. Several tracks from an album called Country Roads and Other Places. And two tracks from an album from 1966 called Tennessee Firebird, which was really weird because it's pure country music. There's not even the two tracks, at least, that Gary selected from the 1966 Tennessee Firebird album are pure acoustic instrumental tracks with violin. Actually, the CD's playing in the background. To what extent you can hear it. It's violin played like in a country fiddle kind of, at times even swing thing. There's not even very little, if any, jazz element to it. It's almost pure acoustic country. Very strange to hear coming from Gary Burton. Both of the tracks from Tennessee Firebird are in that country mode. I don't know if the whole album is like that or whether Gary Burton just selected those two tracks because it's such a contrast to the other stuff that's on the album. So that might not be an album that jazz fanatics necessarily rush to from Gary Burton's late 60s discography. But all the other albums from that period, like Duster, which I know is popular, Lofty Fake Anagram, all these are available on CD. Genuine Tong Funeral, which might be one of the things I have to pick up. And The Time Machine, which is not available on CD, but it's one of those three albums that's coming out in that 2-disc set, along with Something's Coming. Something's Coming, that one track, Careful, that's on this compilation. It's so fantastic. It's really well recorded for something from 1963. And just Jim Hall's guitar, it's so clean. It's so, it reminds me of why I love Jim Hall so much. I'm going to have to get that 2 CD set just to get that Something's Coming album, if nothing else. This is, and it's funny because when I first bought this, I listened to it, put it up on the shelf, didn't pull it down for a lot of years. And now I've probably spun this 4 times in the last 2 days. It's 69 minutes. And I'm sure that when this compilation came out in 1987, in the early days of CDs, probably all of the recordings that are represented here, the albums, were probably out of print. They hadn't yet been issued, I'm sure, on CD. So it was pretty much the only way to hear a lot of these tracks on CD. And really, it won't be until next month that all the tracks will see the laser beam of the CD. Because I believe the Time Machine album that's represented here by 2 tracks has, to the best of my knowledge, I don't think that's been released ever on CD until next month. So this, if you want to sample Gary's 60s stuff, it may lead to you having to pick up more. I know I'm going to, even though it's not the ECM stuff. I obviously like it much better than the GRP stuff and the later period Gary Burton stuff. But I just really, something clicked when I put this on again yesterday. Maybe initially at first I was expecting more ECM-ish type music, but this works on its own. It's really fantastic. And just stylistically all over the place, some great guitarists, some great musicians on here. Gatto Barbieri, who passed away recently, is on here. Carla Bley actually plays on here. Steve Lacy. Jim Hall, as I mentioned, Larry Coryell and Jerry Hahn play on here. Chuck Israel's on bass. Steve Swallow, Bob Moses, Roy Haynes, Larry Bunker on drums, Mike Mantler on trumpet, Howard Johnson on tuba, Jimmy Knepper on trombone. Steve Marcus, I believe, played with Carla Bley on saxophone also. A lot of great musicians on here. And like I said, it's a great way to sample, not to sound like a commercial, Gary Burton's kind of 60s output, and then maybe cherry pick albums that you like from there, maybe get the full albums. I definitely have to get that Something's Coming album from 1963 when that comes out, and probably Genuine Tongue Funeral, the Carla Bley album that she wrote, I believe, specifically for Gary, because that's something a little slightly different than his standard, here's a band, we're going to play a bunch of tunes and improvise on them kind of thing. That's a full piece, and I really do want to hear that full piece. I'm wondering if any of you actually have that already, Genuine Tongue Funeral. Didn't mean to go an hour. That's everything. But I did, and I'm sorry. I don't know, again, when I'm going to... I'm sure my next one won't be an hour. But I've been digging Gary Burton, and for once, instead of just filming the video with my older impressions of these albums that I have not listened to for some time, I decided to play them for a couple days and then record my impressions. And I'm really glad I pulled out especially the Artist Choice album. Really fantastic. So thanks, guys. I miss it. It seems like everybody has gotten a bit busy now that spring is here. I know Carm's back at work. I think Rob, I just get the vibe that people are a little bit busier. And unfortunately, the power supply died for my little Chromebook computer that I use in my kitchen that I watch VC videos whenever I'm cooking and eating. And because the power supply plug doesn't plug in, I can't watch VC videos in there now. The computer's okay, but I had to order another power supply. And so I'm probably going to be a bit behind in my VC video viewing as well, since I can only watch them here in this room on my desktop computer, at least until that power supply gets here. So let's hope the power supply arrives and it's the correct plug and everything for my computer, so I can get back to watching VC videos in the kitchen, because I have a radio with a CD player in there. NPR is the only real radio station that I can pick up that I have any interest in listening to, but there's a lot of stuff in there I really am not interested in hearing. And the few independent, like jazz stations and stuff like that are at the end of the dial at 80, 88, 90, 91, around that area, I really can't pick up living here where I live like I used to in my old place. I can get them in the car, kind of. I can't get them here too well in the condo here, unfortunately. I know some good jazz stations and experimental music stations. So I'm pretty much left with either listening to NPR, and the political talk gets to be a bit too much, or thankfully my boombox that I do have in the kitchen does have a CD player, and I'll bring a CD in there. But I always, I got so much in the last year in that mode of watching the VC videos in the kitchen whenever I cook and eat that I really miss it now that the computer's not charged up. So keep your fingers crossed that the power supply I ordered is the correct one, and that it comes soon and I get back to watching all the videos. Okay, guys, I went on far too long. This is more like one of my old videos. And I hope everybody's doing well. Oh, by the way, anybody that sends me emails, if I don't respond in a few days, if you could resend them, because I went, I don't know, I had something like 30,000 emails that go back even a couple years. And I was sorting them by sender, and I found a couple emails from Andrew that he had sent me in January, that's 4.5 months ago, which I finally responded to, but I never saw them when they first came. So, any of you folks that are, and I'm happy and thrilled to receive your emails. If you do send me an email, and I'll get back to you within a week or so, if you can go into your sent mail, maybe send it to me again and say, hey, dummy, I sent you an email and you didn't see, because I get so much junk. So, I always try to respond. Even if not timely, I wouldn't normally take 4.5 months. And one of them, Andrew, actually even sent on January 1st. I was very touched that he had, actually New Year's Day, he took the time to sit down and write me on a holiday day an email that I never responded to because I didn't see it. Okay, guys. Marathon again. Okay, thanks for watching. Hope there's some value in the Gary Burton video for you. I didn't mean to do such an artist. I really thought I'd just flip through my Gary Burton stuff, but whatever. I'm sure the next one won't be so all-inclusive. Okay, guys. I hope everybody's doing well. Hope you enjoy the video. Maybe it'll put you to sleep. Who knows? And I'll talk to you soon. Take care.